Thank you all so much for waiting. I'm going to introduce myself. I am Lael Chester. I am the director of the Emerging Adult Justice Project at Columbia University's Justice Lab. A bit of a mouthful. And I may be joined at the end by Felipe Franco, who's a senior fellow of the Young Adult Practice at the Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Initiative at the Annie Casey Foundation. But he's having some technical problems and with electricity outages. So if he can't join us, it's too bad, but hopefully he'll be able to by the end. So on behalf of the Justice Labs project team, we welcome you to today's webinar, an info session for a newly released RFI, request for interest, to implement an emerging adult justice developmental framework. As you can maybe tell, this webinar is being recorded, and we are doing that so that we can post it on our website for those who are lucky enough to be on vacation or just can't make it today, that they get a chance to listen in and hear the overview. So I'm going to ask if you can put questions in the chat. That would be terrific. I promise to leave plenty of time during the webinar to try to answer your questions. We are also going to collect the questions that we receive and create an FAQ, frequently asked question document, which we will post on our website, which is eajustice.org. So again, if we, for some reason, don't get your questions, which I think we'll have plenty of time for, or, you want to sort of hear the answers again or get more information, that will be made available on the website. I'm going to start with an overview of what we are going to cover today. So, excuse me, of course it won't. There we go. So today's agenda, I'm going to provide a little background information on emerging adulthood, emerging adult justice. I'm going to give a brief description and overview of the emerging adult justice framework, which we're very excited to kind of share today. I'm going to talk about the overarching goals of the RFI and the process for selecting 3 innovation sites that we would be supporting over about a 2.5 period of time. And then, of course, going to allow for Q&A. So I'm going to just start right off on some background information. Who are emerging adults? So just to make sure that we're all sort of on the same page about a definition, because there are some varieties of how that's defined, which is fine, but at least I'll share how we're defining it for the RFI. We're talking about young people who are involved in the criminal legal system between the ages of 18 to 25. That means that in almost every state, right, they are automatically in the adult system, not the juvenile system. There are emerging adults in the juvenile system, but the folks that are being arrested and then prosecuted, et cetera, that's 18 to 25. This is a distinct developmental stage and a really critically important stage, right? When young people are transitioning from dependent adolescence to increasingly independent and mature adulthood. And this is also a period of time when young people are trying to figure out how to answer the big questions in life, right? Who am I? Where do I come from? And what and who do I want to be? It's often referred to as the age of opportunity. Young people are incredibly malleable during this stage, right? And there's such rapid growth. So, sort of where you are when you're 18 can look extremely different by the time you've gone through this process into your mid, and for some people with histories of trauma, probably later 20s. I want to point out that in our world, in the justice system, we often focus on the negative aspects of this distinct developmental stage, right? And there are plenty to share, right? They share many of the same characteristics as their younger peers, right? They're highly influenced by peers. Risk taking is sort of the hallmark of emerging adulthood. I know as a parent, I used to think that was earlier, like 15, 16. But no, right, a 19-year-old's really at that peak of risk taking. But when we focus on that, we often lose sight of the positive aspects, aspects of emerging adulthood. And really, again, this opportunity, the age of opportunity, which is, I think, critically important as we turn to the next slide, which is what is emerging adult justice, right? That is designing and creating a system that is fair, effective, and developmentally appropriate, right? It's providing services, programs, opportunities for these emerging adults, right, as they transition into adulthood. To do so successfully, right? To become healthy adults. And again, everybody, whether you're in the system or not in the system, you have got to go through this critical developmental stage. And everybody, whether you're in the system or not in the system, needs those supports and programs and opportunities. But if you happen to be in our criminal legal system, how is that going to work, right? How do you make that successful transition? So part of a big part of emerging adult justice, the focus is strength-based and it's growth-focused, right? That's the approach that we want to take with all young people, and that's what we know through research is successful, right? So it doesn't matter, again, if you're in the community or if you're not in the community and you're actually in the justice system. It needs to be strength-based and growth-focused. Unfortunately, our current criminal legal system has lots and lots of evidence. I'm sure all of you know this as well, if not better, than anything I'm going to say today. But right, it can actually harm emerging adults. Right, it not only just creates barriers to their growth, but it actually can derail them, right, and harm them on that life trajectory. They are incarcerated at a disproportionately higher rates. They experience the most extreme racial disparities. And this is something I just really want to emphasize because I think a part of the community, we are very aware, I hope, we are becoming increasingly aware of racial disparities. And because of federal legislation, and on the juvenile side of the fence, right, states to get federal funding for the federal act of, they must try to collect data, right, and analyze data, see if there's racial disparities, and then they must address them. And that ends at emerging adulthood in the system, right? So just at the point where actually the disparities get even higher, which is hard to sort of believe and accept, but is clear from the data. We have very poor outcomes, right? Lifelong consequences for these young people who have been involved in our justice system. And it's also becoming apparent to us as we look at data and that the impact of COVID has only exacerbated these problems, right? And they've been really disconnected. They've been really isolated. Many of their supports, many of their opportunities to grow were sort of taken away from them. At a really, right, this key moment in time. And that's having a huge impact on this generation. If we can change the response, right, of the justice system to this particular population of young people, that becomes a force multiplier, right? That reduces community harm. That strengthens young families, right? That will be seen and really in a positive, not for just this generation, but future generations. So the idea behind emerging adult justice, right? The very premise is that if you can achieve positive youth outcomes, you can also create and foster healthy communities, and you can increase public safety, right? Those are intimately linked, and it's sort of like a domino effect. We all want all three of those outcomes, and they are totally entwined with each other. Emerging adult justice is not brand new, but it is a burgeoning field. And we are seeing some bundles of activity and innovations across the country. So again, this RFI is not in a vacuum, right? Many of you may be working or leading these efforts in your various jurisdictions. And I sort of like to describe the innovations that we're seeing around the country as two buckets. I put one bucket, which is practices, right? Innovations in practices. Overall, what we're seeing is a shift to community investment and to community-based responses. And the way in which that's happening through various practices, innovative practices, are things like specialized diversion or expanding diversion, let's say on the juvenile side, to include emerging adults. Specialized courts, we've seen some that have been sort of established for quite a while, such as San Francisco, and then we're seeing new courts pop up over the last few years. We see specialized caseloads. This might be in probation, this could be parole or reentry, right, where there's this again, focus on this specific distinct developmental group. And we see specialized correctional units, whether those are in jails and prisons. These are some of the practice areas, not all of them, but just to give you a sense and a taste of what's happening out there. We also are seeing innovations in policies and laws, right? These are things where people are trying to impact the system overall. And one of the sort of benefits of some of the policy laws innovations is that it can avoid some of the justice by geography pitfalls, where you could have one town have a really innovative emerging adult justice court, but a mile over, no such thing exists. And so this tends to be a wider swath of jurisdiction. You still might have state to state variability, but you don't necessarily have such tiny scope. And here, a bunch of different things are coming up around the country. One is raising the upper age of juvenile jurisdiction, right? Having the youth system, which is rehabilitative in nature and should be individualized, right? Scoop in some of those emerging adults into its system. We have seen this happen in Vermont. Vermont's the first state, right, to raise the upper age, which the law passed in 2018, to gradually raise it from the 18th birthday to the 19th birthday, which has already happened. That's been implemented. And then next year in July of 2023, it goes up to the 20th birthday. And we're also seeing a lot of states around the country consider this, right? They have bills. Some of them have, passed out of the House or the Senate, at least one of the chambers. And so this is one area that's percolating. Another area is this is tricky because there's no great name for this, but there are these hybrid systems, often called youthful offender laws, but not necessarily, in states where they basically blend elements of the juvenile system and the adult system to apply to this distinct developmental group. Some, these YO laws, some are for under 18, but we have found a number of states that actually cover emerging adults. And the good news is that the Emerging Adult Justice Project is working on a national study on this, and it will be released by the end of this year. So hopefully there'll be more knowledge in the field of that particular innovation. We see states, jurisdictions thinking about either creating or expanding expungement, right, to try to reduce the collateral consequences and the barriers of young people that pick up a record and just can't get themselves out. We see that in policies and laws. And then another one I'll just flag is amending or expanding, right, parole laws or resentencing laws, where emerging adults have a chance that folks do a look, how are they doing, how have they developed, what were the circumstances when they were 19 or 23, right, when that case originated, and where are they now? So again, just examples, just so that just kind of get people's juices flowing. And also, if you happen to be in jurisdiction, you might think, oh yeah, we've already maybe embarked or one or more of these. What we have discovered at the Emerging Adult Justice Project, and really this came about through our learning community, a wonderful group of experts around the country that that met for 3 years and were sort of thinking about policies and practices and the research and where are the gaps and where are the opportunities, is that one of the sort of the gaps that was identified is that a developmental framework specifically for this age group that are specifically in our criminal legal system. There are frameworks out there, developmental frameworks. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're very much adopting the wheel and expanding and focusing on this age group. And so there was this thought that as these innovations are proliferating, right, jurisdictions were sort of clamoring for guidance. And that's really what a framework is. A framework provides guidance. It's not a particular program. I think some people think, oh, I just adopt a program. Nope. The framework allows you to figure out in your site what programs and policies you have that might be able to that fit the framework and that can be made more robust and stronger and more effective for this age group. So our project decided that we wanted to fill this need if we could. We wanted to ground any new framework in research and on the ground practice and community knowledge. Right, there are people working with this age group all the time. So yes, there are a lot of research reports, but there's a huge amount of expertise. And a huge amount of expertise, we'll talk about this more, for young people who have the most expertise, who were directly impacted, right? And went through that system. So they know sort of what the needs are, and they know what works and what helps and what doesn't. We wanted to have the framework sort of, get some endorsement of experts, right? Not just us sitting here, really from different backgrounds, different expertise. We want to be able to promote it to policymakers and advocates moving forward. And then the one in orange on the screen for the PowerPoint, we want to test it in the field. We want to see, does this framework really hold up? And undoubtedly, it's going to need to be shaped some more, redesigned, tweaked. And that's what we want to do. That's part of the process of the feedback loop, is to enhance and refine the framework for the future, for all jurisdictions. So that's sort of the developmental need. So what did we do? How did we get there? The Emerging Adult Justice Project, with the support of the Casey Foundation, we convened experts and created a sort of steering committee of people from all sorts of different angles and experiences, right? To look at what frameworks exist now. Again, we're not starting from scratch. A lot of great work has been happening, right? What we know from the research, and again, applying what we know personally through our practice or for our own experiences, and think about what would that look like if we just applied it to this particular age group in the justice system. This is a list of our steering committee members. So you can see, there's going to be familiar names. I think some of these names are probably on this webinar. So we're thrilled. They've been, had a wonderful time on this project, but this really took sort of the course of 2021 during COVID. And I'm sorry to say it was all via Zoom, right? We couldn't meet in person. And so these are the folks that helped us design this framework, which is, we now believe, should be in the test drive mode. So next steps, right? Today, we have released the request for interest, and we are starting the process of selecting 3 innovation sites, right? 3 jurisdictions that are committed to trying to implement the framework and to test drive it in partnership with us, in partnership, right, with the Casey Foundation, and in partnership with each other, right? The 3 sites are also going to be able to learn from each other, and support each other, which I think is critically important. So we are very much hoping to have, we do not necessarily want all the sites to be working on necessarily one thing, right? We actually want diversity. We want sites that are going to work at different stages of the system. One might focus on detention, for example. One might focus on reentry. One might focus on the front end on diversion. That's fine. And in fact, there's a benefit to us to think about, does the framework work both in the front end, the middle end, and the late stages of the justice system, right? What we call the deeper end. We will choose the sites, we will support those sites, right? In planning and launching and implementing, and so that they can really transform their justice system, right? And have these developmentally appropriate approaches and in their jurisdictions. And we will try to capture lessons learned along the way, right? Not for each of those 3 sites, but really for the country and for the future. I think it's going to be a lot of learning, and the sites will become we'll talk about this a little bit later, but 2 representatives from each site will join the steering committee. So there's going to be this really interesting, I think, and dynamic feedback loop and engagement among everybody. I'm going to go into details about RFI and all of that, but I want to just give just a brief overview of the actual developmental framework. I should tell you that if you go on, again, our website, eajustice.org, we have a short summary description called an overview right on there. So you can read it, you can absorb it, you can think about it. And I'm sure what I present today is going to be sort of a cheat sheet version that may not satisfy, but I'm hoping at least gives folks an overarching idea of where we're at. So the way that this has been sort of envisioned and understood is that change is needed at multiple levels, right? So the first level, which is sort of the yellow mustardy color, right? Level 1 is the individual level, right? How do we ensure that emerging adults have critical experiences and relationships needed to grow into healthy adults, right? So just very much the individual level. And then we expanded out to say the next level, level 2, is the practice level. How can staff and programs adopt practices that support healthy development, right? How are you going to connect emerging adults to community and partners and support their healthy and normative development? I want to emphasize normative because I think sometimes when we get thinking about people in justice system, we forget that many of their experiences, their reaction, behaviors are normative, right? We all kind of go through these stages. We all actually have to go through these stages to reach healthy adulthood. And then, so that's sort of the green level, right? Level 2. And then the other level that was identified is, right, we have to have level 3, which is the systems level. How systems must adopt policies and laws that support healthy development, right? That eliminate those that cause harm. That's important. It's not enough just to the positive. We actually have to get rid of some that are getting in the way and actually more than getting in the way, causing harm. And we need to reorient funding and resources to community-based supports that can sustain emerging adults in the long term. And another theme is that development there's no magic birthday. Doesn't happen in days or weeks or months. It takes years, right? And we want those resources and those opportunities, those supports to be there regardless of whether they're in the justice system or not in the justice system. We all hope everybody's coming out of the justice system or that can avoid the justice system, right? And so those are those community supports that are there in the long term. So again, I'm just going to fly through these slides. I apologize, but please check out the overview that has a more descriptive, just to get a little deeper on the individual level, right? What aspects of individual well-being do emerging adults need to thrive, right? And we identified sort of 5 aspects, right? Safety, belonging, identity and values, competency, and contribution. Right? Those are sort of the main keys. So if you have a framework and you're looking at the individual level, those individuals in your system, right? How are those aspects being addressed, right? And how are those being provided? We also, part of the individual level is also these, what we refer to as core experiences, right? And the relationships. So much of growing up is about building relationships. And emerging adulthood is a lot about experimenting with relationships, right? A romantic relationship, peer relationships, but also ongoing relationships with older adults, parents or parental figures, relationships now with their own children potentially, right? And so again, this is a chart that sort of talks about those core experiences, relationships in a little more a detail and depth. I'm going to jump now to the level 2, right? We're looking at practices, right? Building those partnerships to support those healthy development. Again, we adopted something to sort of help people remember. And again, it's in the overview, cares to talk about, to understand what those practices are. But again, I think anyone who's working in the system now, remembers their own emerging adulthood, are raising emerging adults, and or have worked with other frameworks, right? This is not going to be all brand new, right? This should hopefully be enforcing much of what you already, have done or thought about, but again, providing that guidance and that shape. And then on the level 3, and I think this is the one that sometimes I think jurisdictions can forget in their efforts, is really key, is the policy, the legal, right? How are we going to, how do the systems support the practices that support the individuals, right? That's really, really important. And we do have policies and laws that actually harm the programming and the services and the practices, which then do not support or actually interfere with the growth and the transition for emerging adults. I want to just say that there are a few key pieces that really came out during the course of 2021 as we were developing the framework. And that is that in this age group, there are some items and some experiences, some milestones that are not captured explicitly in some of the frameworks that are geared to youth under 18. I'm going to just give a couple of examples. Exploration, of identity, right? That was talked about in that beginning. Who am I? Where did I come from? Who do I want to be? What do I want to be in the future, right? And as we're younger, we often sort of take on the identities of those around us and our communities. But as we emerge as adults, as we transition into adulthood, we really are exploring those identities in a much deeper way, right? Race, ethnicity, culture, gender, sexual orientation. Not to say any of those aren't explored when you're 12 or 14, but now you're sort of owning it, right? This is you. So who are you? Another big change for emerging adulthood, and that's very important for this distinct developmental stage, is family, right? When you're under 18, the system's really thinking about family as a parent or a guardian, a substitute parent, sort of thing, right? It could be the state, it could be a foster family, it could be other family members or loved ones who sort of can step in and help. Those are all still super important in emerging adulthood, right? But the concept of family is now expanding, right? As they create their own families, their own family unit, they have their own partnerships, they have their own children. It is quite fluid, right? Who they live with, what their relationships are, can change a lot. And anyone thinks about, college years, right? That is a rapid change, a lot of experimentation, a lot of growth. And that is this age, right? And yet you're trying to explore that while at the same time trying to deal with the criminal legal system, right? Those two are not always easily compatible or supportive of each other. And then the other one I'm going to just throw out there as just to highlight as we think of this framework, specific framework, is housing. When you're under 18, somebody's responsible for your house, safe and stable housing. Not all young people under 18 have safe and stable housing, right? They don't even have safe and stable housing when the state's responsible for their housing. But then this quote magic birthday and you're 18, right? That is an enormous issue. And issues of things like couch surfing, not recognized as homelessness, but in fact, right, an enormous issue, and a lot of energy and time, and makes young people incredibly vulnerable as they're trying to figure out every day, like, where am I going to stay tonight? Is it going to be safe? How am I going to do that? So again, an element to this framework that's more specific for emerging adulthood, that again is relevant to a 12-year-old, but it has a different context and maybe a different priority when you hit this distinct developmental stage. I am going to, I didn't do this one, sorry. This is a bird's eye view. Again, this should be and will be, I'm sure, familiar in many ways to folks in the field. This is sort of a bird's eye view of the framework, right? The colors correspond with the sort of yellow, orange is level 1, green is level 2, and blue is level 3. And so where does the criminal justice system sit, the criminal legal system sit within this framework? We try to create what we look like a fortress, right? Which is sort of the purple shape. It's imposed, it's non-voluntary institution, right? It's not the primary source of healthy development at all, right? That's not what we're looking for young people to grow up. And in fact, it often pulls people away from the places, the services, the programming, the communities that can offer that kind of support and those experiences, right? And it isolates them and it prevents them from engaging and making those kinds of achieving those sort of milestones that we sort of hope all young people will reach so that they can reach healthy adulthood. So I think that's sort of a, right, it's just sort of like, it's like a fortress in and of itself. People can get sucked in, they can't always get out. And they're cut off from everything else that we know is happening, needs to happen as people make the transition. So again, I'm going to stop on the framework. I think that hopefully gives you a sense of the overview of our thinking, our process, what's been developed. And I'm going to focus now on the RFI. Okay, so the RFI is again up on our website, and I want to point out a few items. The first is that we are very much calling for and inviting and a team approach, right? We're hoping that jurisdictions will, folks will get together from those jurisdictions from different backgrounds, different experiences, right? And brainstorm, about throwing in your hat and becoming an innovation site. In the team, it'd be really important, in fact, imperative that the team include strong voices, strong presence, supported emerging adults with justice system experiences, right? They have expertise to bring to the table in a way that the rest of us don't, right? And so what does that look like? That might be working with a community group where there are folks on staff that are trained and experts in supporting youth and youth development and youth leadership, so that the young people can participate fully, right? It might be thinking about how you set up your own group in a jurisdiction in ways that support them, the young people, support their voices, encourage, right, their participation and collaboration. They might be on a different schedule, for example, during the day. So thinking about that. So that's the team approach. The other one is multi-system collaborations, right? You just saw those colorful diagrams and charts, and the criminal legal system was that fortress, right? Everything else was community based, right? The things in the community, whether it's civic engagement, whether it's education, whether it's work, whether it's relationships, right? And these are young people who are going through all these things. So multi-system collaborators, child welfare system is an obvious one, right? A significant number of our emerging adults in our system, although we don't always track it, but we know are really duly involved, right? Or they're coming out of the support or the services of the child welfare system. And sometimes really, right, like falling off that cliff. That would be a classic collaborator. Workforce development, right? An obvious collaborator. Education, another obvious collaborator. So I'm not going to go through them, but you get the idea that young people are not just in the criminal legal system, right? Their needs and the supports are multifaceted. And then other key partners, and this is going to be very site specific. It may be that in some sites that you're like, there's a no-go unless you have all the key justice leaders involved, or maybe it's a particular individual, maybe a particular community group. You really want to think through who are the folks that we really want all collaborating. And I'm going to just throw this out that there are times where something is, potentially more law enforcement, prosecutorial led, right? The best collaborations I've seen are the ones that have the defense, indigent defense right there collaborate. Same thing with indigent defense, right? Same thing with probation, same thing. I'm not pointing out one, but again, this is an opportunity to really think about that team and the team approach. The other thing that's interesting and potentially different for this RFI is that we're asking jurisdictions that saying, you can focus on one stage of the system. There's lots of stages, right? And maybe you want to focus on detention, right? Emerging adults who are being held on bail, right? Or maybe you want to look at community supervision. Maybe you want to look at probation. We're not saying which it has to be. And so it's really a chance for each team to figure out where your focus is. Maybe you've already been focusing on this, and this is another way to approach the issue, right? And so you want to leverage that and use the framework to guide that work. Maybe it's a stage that everyone is identified as a real weakness, or maybe even a strength in some ways in your jurisdiction, and this would be a way to make it even better, right? So again, the RFI is on the website, eajustice.org, but I just want to highlight, those are a little unusual maybe for RFIs. I know I've replied to a number of RFIs that can be very narrow and formulaic, like these are the people, and we're really asking you to think through what is going to work best for your jurisdiction, and we want people to sort of think about that and spend time on that. I highly encourage folks to review the scoring rubric. We're trying to be super transparent, right? It's up there. It's on the websites on the end of the RFI. And again, look at the framework, the overview of the framework, and think about those elements of it. as you both design your team and think about what your focus might be. Just nuts and bolts for a second. What are the due dates? So what's happening? So we have this informational webinar, which I'm going to stop very soon because I want to get questions. We are inviting jurisdictions or teams to submit a one-page double-sided overview of their proposal. So very brief. This is, we do not want people to spend, forever on this. It's encouraged, is not required, but it's really strongly encouraged. And you do that by September 14th. The advantage of that is that then we can provide you some initial feedback. We can have some conversations about your proposal. We can pose questions we think that might be helpful or have ideas that might be helpful as you shape the actual submission. So again, not required, but if you can get it in, we really will devote time and energy to working with you and thinking this through. The actual submissions are going to be due on November 16th at midnight Eastern time, right? Which is a ways out. I know we're going to blink it. It's going to be there. It's always faster than I think, but we did it on purpose. It's going to take time for jurisdictions to think about this. Does this work for you? How would it work? And who's going to be at the table? And all of those kinds of questions. And it's July. A lot of people hopefully are on vacation. We didn't want to rush this. But on the other hand, I also know from the other end how long this can take as a process. So the sooner you start, the better, I think. We will send notifications, right? Their decisions on January 14th of 2023. We're going to do some prep work to be ready to go and then launch officially the site innovations on March 1st of 2023. I am going to open it up to questions. I guess one thing I forgot before I go to questions, before I go to questions is sort of what is the support for the innovation sites? So the Emerging Adult Justice project will support the sites, right? We will be lending any expertise, connections, guidance that we have. We will, available for trainings. We are available for meetings at the site. We will be doing having the steering committee will meet. We'll have a convening in person as well. So all the sites and the steering committee and outside experts, right? Speakers, researchers, practitioners, trainings, right? We can provide trainings for the different jurisdictions as the needs arise. And again, needs might be quite different from the different sites, and we're gonna be individualized. We're gonna provide what's needed for those particular sites. The other level of support is from the generosity of the oops, sorry, did I lose? Yep. Of the Casey Foundation, and that is support for next year of $50,000 per site, the selected site. And so that's on top of, support that we would reimburse for travel and those kinds of things. And so, sites can think about that. How would that help? How might you use that? Is there an opportunity there to leverage further funding and support? Is this what is this going to be used for in particular? Is it for facilitation? Is it for a particular leading staff that's assigned? How does that work, right? So those are examples. And the other thing I'll just say is that we're very lucky to be working with the Casey Foundation because they have a lot of expertise on supporting young people with system experience, right? Who participating in reform efforts. And, our steering committee, we were very fortunate to have 3 youth fellows as members of our steering committee. 4. There were really right, remarkable and a huge component of this work. And so, thinking about best and promising practices around that, right, and other resources of people who have been thinking through, whether it's trainings and all those kinds of things. So it's really exciting, and certainly very thrilled to be working with we're all thrilled to be working with the Casey Foundation and others. I have a few concluding remarks, but I think at this point, I just want to see if there are any questions. I'm gonna grab one that I see. What role, if any, do you see for researchers in this process? I see a big role for researchers in this process. I think one of the issues that we're going to have is figuring out the impact, right, of implementing a developmental framework. And I think that it's going to have to be a key component. On one level, the Emerging Adult Justice Project can be helpful, right? What's one of the things we're going to work with in sites is, what data are you currently keeping? What data might we need? How do we collect that, et cetera? But I think on a grander scale, right, that's a good step and is important and necessary. But in a grander scale, I think that, right, the research component is going to need to be more robust. The other thing I think it's important is that research is ongoing research, but past research, current research, and future research is going to help unpack, I think, for the sites how the best to implement this developmental framework. And so it's going to be really important to link the bodies of research, the people doing the research, right, and get that information to those sites. And it will be really important as we work with sites to identify gaps in research, like where, they're struggling. How do we know what's going on, and seek out that research? So I think it's going to be a continual an important dynamic relationship. And I think we're going to have to sort out a sort of more formal mechanisms along the way. But just off the top of my head, that those are the things that I think are up there. Any other questions? I'm just trying to look here. Can the lead, I see one, can the lead applicant be a government agency? Yes, the lead applicant can be a government agency. The lead applicant can also be a community-based program or agency. It can go either way. This is not again, this is a nice thing about this, it's flexible, right? There's so many RFIs, RFPs that I myself have responded to over the years, where it really is a very much a certain model, which is great. But this one is going to be created by all of us. And so we welcome that. I think one of the things you'll see in the RFI is that whoever is sort of submitting, we do ask somebody to have a name and an organization and contact information. But we also ask that you list your partners. If it's individuals, then their bios. If it's more than individuals, it's an organization, let's say an agency or a community group or nonprofit. Describe the description of that organization, and that we have letters of support, so that we know that we're not just listing them, that everybody's really on board in participating. So again, one agency, could be government agency or not, it's going to take the lead, but all the other parties not only will be listed, but there'll be an indication of support and commitment. I think it'll be super exciting. I'm thrilled to be doing this, but it's a lot. There's no question. This is a big commitment. But I think the returns, right, on for the benefit to emerging adults, the benefits to the justice system, the benefits to our communities, right, the benefits of our future generations, the benefits to our communities are huge. And so, I think that's why we're taking this on. Am I missing any other questions? Does any of my colleagues want to chime in if there is a question? I don't hear any, but oh, I feel badly if I'm missing anything. Let me just see. Let me just check one more time. Thanks for being patient. Okay. No, one more question. Are the letters required when submitting the one pager? No, the letters are not required when submitting the one pager. So you could, that's due sooner. You could share your wish list. I think it would be helpful to just indicate, whether it's likely or unlikely or something like that. But no, that's really only for the full submission, if that's helpful. Okay, I am going to stop sharing my screen for a minute, and I'm going to wrap up. And again, Q&A free, or we're going to collect questions now, and in the future we will post those frequently asked ones with our answers on our website. We hope that's helpful. I see that Felipe is having again some electricity problems, poor guy. So he just wanted to, he added in the chat, this is groundbreaking initiative, and we at the Annie Casey Foundation are looking forward to supporting the Emerging Adult Justice Project and the 3 trailblazer sites. I love it. Implementing this developmental framework. This is part of the foundation's commitment to improving the well-being and prospects of youth and young adults to thrive by age 25. That's partly why it's been such a pleasure to work with Annie Casey Foundation. This is a deep commitment. This is part of their central mission. Whether it's the justice system, child welfare, employment, workforce development, right? These are all issues they work on all the time and see the overlap, the relationship, the symmetry. So that is very much what we are seeking with this RFI. I'm going to just close by saying, again, we're excited, super excited by this opportunity. We're really pleased you guys came and joined a webinar on at least in the Boston area, a sunny summer day. We hope that you also share this RFI with others you think might be interested, even if you're not, or you know people in other jurisdictions. It would be great to spread the word. If you have ideas of people, places, organizations that we should reach out to, we welcome that. So thank you in advance. Want to thank our steering committee. You saw all those members. They worked really hard over the year to help us design a developmental framework. And this was a big undertaking. We also had many other colleagues who provided us feedback and support, including the development of the selection process and selection criteria for the innovation site. So you know who you are, and we thank you because we're absolutely terrific in helping us. And then, of course, we want to thank the Annie Casey Foundation for collaborating and supporting what I admit is a really ambitious initiative, right? We're not trying to tweak here. This is really about transformation, and there's some risk. Maybe we're being the best side of the risk-taking of emerging adults. Maybe we're enveloping that, right? There's a risk to this kind of a project, but we think the returns are well worth the risk. And the current system is not working and is causing harm. And I know we can do better. And so we're really excited to select sites, to support sites, and then to support the field overall as we move forward. So again, there'll be a link to this webinar on our website. I don't think it will take long to get up on there, but maybe a day, but you'll find it. We will also, if people haven't subscribed to our newsletter, please do. It's again, our website, eajustice.org. You can click on subscription for our newsletter. And I say that because we'll have updates in our newsletter. We share opportunities like this one and others that maybe we host or don't host We provide updates in the field that we hope are useful to all of you in your ongoing work. So we'll also be sure to include that link in our next newsletter for those of you subscribing. So I think that's it. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. And thanks to the whole team. You just see my face, but it's a team of people putting all this together. Maya, Soraya, Naoka, Selin, everybody. So thank you all and have a good rest of the day.